Have you ever felt the cold gaze of something watching you when no one else is around? Imagine being the last to leave, the museum silent and empty. But something is waiting, watching, lurking just beyond the edge of reason. Tonight, let me take you on a journey where reality blurs with nightmare. But beware. This tale is best experienced with headphones, where every whisper creeps into your mind, and the darkness becomes your only companion. Close your eyes, lie in bed, and let the shadows tell you their secrets. Welcome, brave listener. My name is the Takes Keeper, the collector of creepy stories. Tonight, I invite you to step into a world where art and horror intertwine, where the boundaries of reality are thin, and the unknown is just a breath away. As you listen, let the echoes of this tale wrap around you, pulling you deeper into the darkness. Remember, the best way to feel the story is to close your eyes and let your imagination guide you. Now, let us begin. Clara had always loved the museum at night. The vast, echoing halls, usually filled with chattering visitors, took on a different character once the last patron left, and the lights dimmed to a soft, almost reverent glow. As the night curator, she had grown accustomed to the creaks and groans of the old building, the sound of her own footsteps on the marble floors, and the way the art seemed to breathe when no one was watching. It was on one of these nights, just as Clara was finishing her rounds, that she first noticed the painting. The portrait hung in the farthest gallery, a room rarely visited even during the busiest hours. The painting depicted a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, with a face that could only be described as hauntingly beautiful. Her pale skin contrasted sharply with the dark background, and her eyes, those eyes, seemed to follow Clara wherever she moved. Clara had never seen this painting before. She prided herself on knowing every piece in the museum's collection, yet this one was unfamiliar. There was no plaque beneath it, no artist's name, no title. It was as if the painting had simply appeared out of thin air. As Clara stood there staring into the woman's eyes, she felt a strange unease creeping over her. The woman in the painting looked almost alive. Clara shook off the feeling and told herself she was being silly. It was late, and she was tired. She made a mental note to ask the director about the painting in the morning and moved on to finish her duties. But the painting stayed with her, lurking in the back of her mind like a shadow she couldn't shake. As she made her way back to her office, she felt an inexplicable pull, a desire to return to the gallery and look at the painting again. But Clara resisted. It was just a painting, she told herself. Nothing more. That night, Clara's sleep was restless. She dreamt of the woman in the painting, her eyes following her through the darkened halls of the museum, her expression shifting from sorrow to something more sinister. In the dream, the woman's lips moved, but no sound came out, only a cold, suffocating silence. Clara awoke with a start, her heart pounding. She glanced at the clock, 3:33 a.m. The time felt significant, but she couldn't say why. She tried to shake off the unease, but the image of the woman's eyes lingered. The next night, Clara found herself drawn back to the gallery. She told herself it was curiosity, that she needed to know more about the painting, but deep down, she knew it was something else, something darker. When she entered the gallery, the air was colder, and the shadows seemed deeper, more menacing. The painting was still there, of course, but something was different. The woman's expression had changed. Her once neutral face now wore a look of despair, her eyes filled with tears that seemed ready to spill onto the canvas. Clara's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't possible. Paintings didn't change on their own. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on the woman's face. As she did, she heard a faint whisper, so soft she almost missed it. "Help me." Clara froze. The voice had come from the painting, she was sure of it, but that was impossible. She must be imagining things. Yet the more she stared at the painting, the more she felt an overwhelming sadness, as if the woman's sorrow was seeping into her very soul. "Help me," the voice whispered again, more insistent this time. Clara stumbled back, her heart racing. She turned and fled the gallery, refusing to look back. She didn't stop until she reached her office, slamming the door behind her. She was shaking, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. What was happening? Was she losing her mind? She forced herself to take deep breaths, trying to calm down. She needed to be rational. It was late, and she was tired, that was all. But even as she told herself this, she knew it wasn't true. Something was terribly wrong with that painting. For the next few nights, Clara avoided the gallery, but the painting haunted her thoughts. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the woman's face, her expression growing more desperate, her whispers echoing in Clara's mind. By the fifth night, Clara couldn't take it anymore. She had to know the truth. She waited until the museum was empty, then made her way back to the gallery. The painting was as she remembered, but now the woman's face was contorted with fear, her mouth open in a silent scream. Clara felt a wave of dread wash over her. She had to do something. She couldn't leave the woman like this. But what could she do? It was just a painting, and yet the voice was so real, so desperate. "Help me," the voice pleaded, louder now. Clara reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched the surface of the painting. The canvas was cold, almost icy to the touch. As soon as her fingers made contact, she felt a jolt, like an electric shock, and the room around her began to spin. When the spinning stopped, Clara found herself standing in a dark, cold room. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the walls were lined with old, rotting portraits, each one more disturbing than the last. But it was the painting at the far end of the room that drew her attention, the portrait of the woman. But this time, the painting wasn't hanging on a wall. It was propped up on an easel, and standing beside it was a man. His back was to Clara, but she could see his hands, long, bony fingers clutching a brush, dripping with red paint. The man turned slowly, and Clara felt her blood run cold. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow and sunken, his skin stretched tight over his skull. He smiled at her, a chilling, lifeless grin. "You've come," he said, in a voice that was more a rasp than speech. "I've been waiting for you." Clara tried to move, to run, but her feet were rooted to the spot. She could only watch as the man turned back to the painting, dipping his brush into the red paint. No, not paint, Clara realized with horror. Blood. It was blood. "What are you doing?" Clara managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. The man didn't answer. Instead, he began to paint, his strokes quick and precise. As he worked, the woman in the painting began to change. Her eyes, once filled with fear, now looked resigned, as if she had accepted her fate. "Stop!" Clara screamed, finding her voice at last. "Stop it!" But the man continued, oblivious to her pleas. When he was finished, he stepped back, admiring his work. The woman's face was now contorted in agony, her eyes wide and staring, her mouth twisted in a silent scream. The man turned to Clara, his smile widening. "She's mine now," he whispered, "just as you will be." Before Clara could react, the man lunged at her, his hands closing around her throat. She gasped for breath, struggling to break free, but he was too strong. The room began to fade, darkness closing in around her. Just as she was about to lose consciousness, Clara heard the voice again, soft, pleading, "Help me." With a final burst of strength, Clara broke free from the man's grip and stumbled back. She turned and ran, her only thought to escape this nightmare. But no matter how far she ran, the room seemed to stretch on endlessly, the walls closing in around her. Finally, she reached the door, a heavy wooden door that loomed before her like a tombstone. She grabbed the handle and pulled with all her might, the door creaking open just enough for her to slip through. As she passed through the doorway, she felt a sharp pain in her chest, like a knife twisting in her heart. She screamed, but no sound came out. The darkness swallowed her whole. When Clara opened her eyes, she was back in the gallery, standing in front of the painting. The woman's face had returned to its original, neutral expression, but her eyes were different. They were Clara's eyes. Clara tried to move, to scream, but she was frozen in place, her body no longer her own. She was trapped, staring out from the canvas, her mind screaming in silent terror. As the museum's doors opened the next morning, the day curator, Amelia, entered the gallery to begin her rounds. She paused in front of the painting, tilting her head as she examined it. Something about it seemed different, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. With a shrug, Amelia turned away and continued her rounds, leaving the gallery behind. And in the painting, Clara watched, helpless, as the world moved on without her, forever trapped in the portrait of sorrows, waiting for the next victim to take her place. Thank you for joining me on this chilling journey. As the night grows darker and the whispers fade, remember that not all things are as they seem. The next time you find yourself alone, think of Clara and the haunted painting, and wonder what might be watching you from the shadows. Until next time, I am the Takes Keeper, the collector of creepy stories. Sleep well, if you can.